Hello everybody, CritCrab here with a two-part story actually. First off, sorry for not uploading as much as I could have. That is completely on me and I won't do it again. Secondly, this story is a lot like what you would get when someone who takes anime too seriously takes D&D too seriously. Just saying right now. Anyways, let's roll this post. This is a story from a few years back when I still studied at the university. My gaming group consisted of a mix of study mates and older friends, all aged in their early to mid-20s. The group was great and still keeps together nowadays, but 8 years later, well, except for one guy, a classic that guy with a particular lack of self-awareness. This is the story about the many red flags he raised and him ultimately leaving the campaign. The first big campaign we played together used the Anima Beyond Fantasy system, a niche and kind of obscure Spanish TTRPG that is basically high fantasy on super cocaine. Highly recommended, we still play it. I was the ST and had 4 players. Charlie played a surprisingly deep barbarian from the far north with a penchant for eating raw birds, occasional cannibalism, and hacking people to pieces with war axes. The second player, Jacob, rolled a hardcore survivalist and martial artist from a jungle country that acted as the grown-up in the group. Jacob was probably the greatest player in the campaign, and his character went through an amazing evolution. But that is a story for another time, and definitely another sub-forum. Thirdly was Jake, that played a circus runaway wizard psychic, yes, that is a thing, and it is awesome, that accidentally killed himself in an arcane mishap. Jake eventually re-rolled a crazy elven wizard, which was great. Anyways, the fourth player. He was Craig, the focus of the story. He rolled an upbeat, chi-wielding Eastern monk that dripped of shonen protagonist material. I think his catchphrase was screaming, "Springtime of youth," from the top of his lungs and doing an obnoxious fist pump. Most of the time, Craig's character was fine, but along the road, Craig and his character started showing their true selves, much to the horror of the gaming group. The campaign started in a typical high fantasy fashion, the player character being sold as slaves together in some remote crap hole of the world. I think I even warned my players that an Elder Scrolls opening was coming, so they should prepare themselves for starting at absolute zero. The 4 players were captured along with 2 NPCs that would both become integral to the overarching plot, an old former priest and a young sorceress. Now, this was the first session of the campaign, and from what I know, the time the first red flag came up, said sorceress named Rei was from an eastern land described in the setting as not Japan during the feudal era with magic and katanas everywhere. As a result of her upbringing, again inspired by the time period that the eastern country emulated, she was very submissive, polite, and timid. Immediately after I described her, Craig had this strange look on his face, and he immediately had his character scoot over trying to help her, more or less ignoring the fellow captives. Anyway, the group managed to overthrow the crew of the slave ship and took it for themselves. The group went on loads of adventures across the seas in their stolen slaver ship, fighting big bad evil guys and chthonic horrors left and right. Things were going fine, and we had lots of fun. With time, Craig's character's affections for Rei kept growing, and it eventually became mutual. Romance and all that was a pretty natural part of the campaign by design, as it was encouraged proper role-playing and character growth. I would say we handled it quite well compared to all the other horror stories I read here. Rei and Craig's characters became intimate, which made Craig exceptionally happy. In between game sessions, he wrote all of these kinds of novels about his character's affection for Rei and sent them to me. Unsuspecting of things to come, I graciously applauded his dedication to the game. At one point, Rei was separated from the group for an extended amount of time. Craig was expectedly upset with this. He became increasingly quiet between sessions and did all sort of odd things in character. On top of my head, I remember him once yelling out of character at another player that he wanted to carry an unconscious nubile girl instead of him. Jake, which played in character, just went like, "Sure dude, whatever," and handed over the unconscious girl to Craig. It was weird and awkward, as it sounds. Eventually, Rei came back to the group and had undergone quite a radical transformation for reasons I will not go into here. Her personality, formerly submissive and timid, had become sarcastic, extroverted, and at times quite abrasive. This did not sit very well with Craig, and he was noticeably upset by this evolvement. After this point, 2 parallel stories unfolded, one in character and one out of character. In character, Rei and Craig's characters just grew apart. Craig's character ignored Rei, and their relationship just kind of fizzled out by lack of mutual interest. Such things happen, and that's what would happen in real life. The more interesting story is how Craig handled it out of character. He became increasingly antagonistic towards Rei, yawned, rolled his eyes, and made remarks about whenever she did or said anything. I remember him saying, "Can't she just shut the F up," out of character at one point. The group tried to ignore this strange behavior the best they could. The strangeness became even more apparent since the problem with Ray's transformation was limited only to Craig. The other players found Ray amusing, funny, and a little bit sad at the same time. In other words, her inclusion in the story was still appreciated and they thought she was a great character, but for Craig, his love turned into bitter hatred for his lost waifu. After some time, he decided to switch character in an effort to cut away the no doubt strange concoctions of feelings he was still having about Ray. Still, even with the new character on the table, he could not bear the sight of her. His hatred doubled when he found out that Ray had moved on from Craig's shonen anime character that had also left the group, and became involved with Jake's crazy elven wizard. Out of character, Craig was incredibly angry and upset about this. We, as in Craig and myself, spent God knows how many hours talking about the issue, trying to find some way to solve it, or at least I tried. With my non-existent degree in psychology, I felt like I was giving actual relationship advice to Craig, which was incredibly bizarre and a bit distressing at the same time. This new character did not last long. Craig decided to leave the group for personal reasons and not having enough time to roleplay. After leaving the campaign, he told me that he felt personally betrayed, especially for me giving away Ray to Jake. At this point, I was pretty fed up with his obsessive rants, but did not want to antagonize him any more than necessary. I just kind of said that I was sorry that things turned out the way they did, but one should be careful to separate character from player. Let's just say Craig didn't qualify for the national team of separating persona from person, so to point it out, there was no obstacle for Craig to continue pursuing Ray in her new and improved version. I had half expected him to get to know the new her, but I think he felt like it was too much of a chore as he had already quote-unquote won her and didn't want to bother doing it again. But I digress, I can't really say what was going on in his head. Anyway, that was the long-winded story about my problematic player Craig leaving the campaign, which lasted for another 2 years before concluding his absence. There are more stories about Craig being that guy and his ultimate meltdown that ended in him quitting the group and renouncing his friendship, his own bizarre campaigns, and many other weird tales. Tell me in the comments if you want to hear more about Craig. There is, as of this video, a second part, so I will upload it promptly. If you want to help support the channel in a way that's both completely free and easy, then please do leave a like on this video, and if you want to see the next video as soon as it comes out, then please do subscribe. This has been CritCrab, and till next time.